Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was the son of Apollo and guardian of Hades' children. Minato Namikaze was an alias, used unwillingly by a punished Apollo. Once he realized what had happened, the god struck a deal. 15 years later, Naruto Uzumaki is taken from the leaf by the god. 7 years after that, he takes his post as the guardian of Hades' children. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 6. The streak was over. The campers, for the first time in 50 matches, have won a game of capture the flag. The hunters were in a state of disbelief, none more so than Zoe Nightshade, who glared from her spot dangling upside down at the blonde smiling at her with his hand up in a victory sign while he hugged Athena's daughter Annabeth with his other arm. "How dost that man continue to best me?" was the one thought echoing in her mind, joined only by the blood rushing to her head. She thought over her plan. Like many times before, she would break away with a small group while the main force of the hunters would charge and capture the creek, creating a safe passage for when the retrieval group would need to return. With the Aphrodite children participating in the creek defense, again, Zoe was assured that the game would be hers once again. And then the hunters could leave to save their mistress from whatever trouble she was in. She never took him into account. The one variable that would surely throw her off guard, that damned son of the sun god. He not only separated her from her initial group on both flanks, but he also managed to stall her in hand-to-hand combat, moving her into place before a trap he set strung her up by her ankles in a tree. He then quickly sent 2 more of those shuriken at her, a hidden wire binding her arms to her torso. She was effectively humiliated and was in prime view to see the daughter of Athena reappear beside him while waving a flag in one hand while the other held a dark cap of the mortal sport variety, both giving her a grin. The tricky sportsman, as he was dubbed by some of the other hunters and her mistress, could manipulate any prey to do whatever he wished before he went in for the kill. According to Artemis, it was how Apollo often hunted with her when they were younger, before his hormones kicked in and he became addicted to the carnal arts. Why her lady insisted they not shoot the boy before he grew up to be like his father, Zoe didn't know. Honestly, it would have saved her and some of her sisters some rather embarrassing encounters if he were killed on that first day they met. Flashback. Nearly 6 years ago, in the wilds of Canada, after successfully hunting a very elusive game of boar, the hunters were taking a break. Zoe was helping one of her youngest sisters pitch a tent when it happened. Artemis, who was plotting out her next hunt, suddenly left her tent with her bow in hand, an arrow notched and prepared to shoot at the edge of the camp. Zoe and her fellow hunters each mimicked their lady, preparing for a fight. Then there was a bright flash and a sudden bout of warmth that caused the snow to melt. Silence filled the camp before they heard faint cursing that slowly became louder with each moment. Then, he entered the campground. The man looked to be physically 15. Wet blonde hair hung over his slightly rounded and tanned face, obscuring other features from view. He was built like a runner would be, but scarring was visible on his right arm. He wore torn pants and a bloody shirt, revealing bite marks and lean muscle, underneath a white jacket with red flames decorating it. On his right arm was a blood-red shield and strapped to his back was a quiver. His arms were wrapped around themselves and he was shivering profusely. "No good, damned deadbeat, I ought to," the blonde muttered as he stumbled into the camp, bracing himself against a tree. He panted before looking up, his eyes widening and his jaw slackened as he took in the amount of girls seemingly near his age. "Who art thou?" Zoe demanded, glaring at the obviously male figure, "and tell us why thou hast traveled here." "Okay, I know that was English, but seriously, what the hell did you just say?" the man asked in confusion. Mocking her as if he didn't know English. Artemis spoke next, "Give me one reason to let you walk away on 2 feet, man." The blonde looked at her and then looked down at his left hand, which had a piece of paper within it, before looking back up at her. The action repeated itself several times, gaining the ire of the hunters, before he asked, "Are you Artemis?" The tension could be cut with a knife, it was so thick. The goddess eyed him cautiously before nodding stiffly. He tossed the paper behind him, losing it in a chilly wind, and took a single step forward, before he fell to his hands and knees with his head bowed. "I humbly set myself before you, he said with a voice full of conviction and pleading, after traveling for, gods how long was it, a long time, I ask you no, I beg you to teach me. That certainly earned him a few shocked gasps and wide eyes. Insolent swine. Zoe found herself scowling as she approached him and pressed the arrow to his head as she drew the bowstring. How dost thou even ask such a thing? Thine name for thine tombstone before I end thine life. She didn't know what or how it happened, but there was a poof of smoke and she found herself pointing an arrow at one of her sisters. The man had vanished. Seriously, what the hell are you saying? His dimmed voice asked from within the campgrounds. The hunters turned to face him and he was leaning against a tree just to stay upright. I'm still learning English, is the ine even a word? Or is this another Greek thing my bastard of a father left out? This sparked curiosity within Artemis, causing her to ask, who are you, and who is your father, demigod? He chuckled before wincing and holding his side, ow, name's Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of the Red Death Kushina Uzumaki and the fourth fire shadow Minato Namikaze. My father, Minato, was actually your brother, Apollo. Bowstrings tightened as they were drawn back, making him sigh, damn bastards going to get me killed, again. Though Zoe didn't hear his additional whisper, Artemis did. Her eyes narrowed before she examined the boy, looking him up and down before sighing. She rubbed her eyes, leave now, and I will forgive your insolence. But I dash. He tried, only for her to give him a glare. He swallowed and nodded before holding his free hand in front of him with his index and middle finger extended. In a flash of light, he was gone. Zoe looked at her leader and asked, Milady, why didn't thou change that man into a jackalope? I would have been annoyed to no end by Apollo if I never changed him back, Artemis replied after a moment of thought, I must see to Olympus. Zoe, watch over your sisters while I am away. The hunt will resume as soon as I return. Of course, milady, Zoe said with her head bowed. Flashback end. Of course, that man was trained during her absence from the hunters. Apollo must have threatened her in order to get milady's help, Zoe mused before she groaned. Her head was starting to hurt. Getting angry from her position, she called to the blonde, release me at once. Tisk, and she made such a nice ornament, didn't she, Annie? Naruto asked his fellow blonde. Annabeth giggled and nodded her head. She sure did, the girl replied before planting the flag in the ground. Naruto chuckled before he notched an arrow and let it fly. Within a second, Zoe was unbound and in a free fall from 20 feet up. Granted the fall wouldn't kill her, it was still terrifying nonetheless. Her fall came to a quick stop as two firm limbs caught her. You can open your eyes, you know, a familiar and irritating voice said with a withheld snicker. Zoe's black eyes opened to see amused cerulean and golden orbs staring at her. She was lost in them for a split second due to her confusion before she shook herself of her daze and glared. He had caught her from her fall, the same way a damsel would be saved. Thou art pushing thine luck, Uzumaki, Zoe warned him. She was immediately set down and Naruto crossed his arms. The name is Naruto, Zoe-chan, the blonde enunciated his pronunciation as she wriggled out of the ropes. Once she was free, she glared and opened her mouth to rebuttal, but was cut off as people gasped. She's never left the attic before, Chiron's odd statement made her turn around and gape as a blue wispy skeleton covered in blue cloth. Sapphire shined from the eye sockets as it slithered towards both Zoe and Naruto. Zoe knelt, but it bypassed her and went straight for the blonde. Naruto took a step back as sweat went down the back of his neck. That damn fear of spirits never left him, and right now the Oracle of Delphi was doing a fantastic job of imitating one. It eventually stopped right in front of him and glowed brightly before a new figure took its place. It was the third Hokage, who smiled kindly and looked as though he hadn't died nearly a decade prior, before he spoke in a rhyme, to the goddess in chains 6 shall go, in the land without rain 5 will learn of true sorrow. Gigi, what are you dash? Naruto asked before it changed into that of Haku, another decade-old memory, Haku. United as one, hunters and campers shall prevail, the girly boy said with his disturbingly feminine voice, as the bane of Olympus reveals the trail. What is going dash? Haku changed once more, but this time it was someone more recently dead. Naruto fell backwards and scooted away as he spoke. Ringed eyes and red hair towering over him, prompting him to name the person, and Nagato. For the Titan one must become a living mast, the former self-proclaimed god started, before the end the guardian shall face his past. The form changed back to the oracle before it collapsed in front of the hyperventilating Naruto. Kirin stared before cursing as he realized what was happening. He's going into shock. Get out of my way. Naruto's vision went dark as the centaur and his fellow campers approached while Zoe knelt at the oracle's side with wide eyes. Let's finish this, Naruto, a man with one eye said as his hand went to the bandana around his head, Sharingan. Naruto. Thalia cried out while running towards him. Get out of here, I can handle it. He ordered her as he held his arm up, come on roar. There was a spine-tingling sensation before there was a loud roar and a bright flash. His vision was clearing and before him was a spectral force as red as blood. What the hell took you so damn long, kid? It's time to party, Kyubi. Naruto's eyes snapped open with a loud gasp and he shot up in his bed. He looked at his wrist, sighing in relief when he took note that around it was the bracelet with the bright red ruby in the center. He clutched the jewelry before whispering, thank the gods, you're still here, Q. Naruto. The blonde looked up at his name before a body impacted with his. With arms wrapped around his sides, Nico D'Angelo looked up at him with a smile, you're up. I was, Bianca and I were worried. Naruto smiled and ran a hand over Nico's raven locks, I'm fine, thanks for your concern, Nico. You sure? The boy asked. Upon getting a nod, he smiled, good, oh. Kirin said that if you could, hurry over to the main building for a counselor meeting, whatever that means. Naruto groaned as he swung his still-clothed legs off the bed, well, best not keep him waiting. Can I come? Nico asked as the blonde stood and got dressed. After pulling his shirt on, Naruto looked at him and smiled sadly. Next time for sure, the blonde said to the boy. Upon seeing his now downcast look, Naruto reached over and ruffled Nico's hair again, tell you what, I'll teach you some neat tricks when I get back if you behave for your sister. Yeah. The clone thing? Nico asked hopefully. Maybe, maybe not, guess you'll have to wait and see, Naruto replied with a grin before he left the room, come on, let's go find your sister and then I'll meet up with Kirin at the big house. This meeting is pointless. Zoe announced as she sat along with the other counselors, Grover, Mr. D, and Kirin, the hunters need to leave immediately. In case you forgot, the oracle told Naruto that, united as one hunters and campers will prevail, Thalia quipped with a smirk as Zoe's teeth clenched. She's right, Zoe, Kirin chimed in, you wouldn't be allowed to leave without Naruto anyway as he was the one granted the quest. Quest? Naruto asked as he walked in before crossing his arms in an X, no way. I am not going on a quest. I've got things to do like watch over the D'Angelo siblings, make sure my brothers and sisters are trained up to snuff, train myself so I don't get fat, get back in touch with my network dash. You don't have a choice, Naruto, Annabeth pointed out, getting a pout from the older teen as he stopped listing things he had to do. The younger blonde continued by pointing out one fact, the oracle came to you for a reason. Yeah, probably because my dad interfered. Naruto grumbled as he put a hand on his face with a groan. Lowering his hand, he then asked, what is the oracle anyway? How did it see those people? I mean 2 of them have been dead for at least a decade. The oracle tends to deliver quests and warnings under the guise of familiar faces to make it easier for younger campers to comprehend, Kirin explained to the confused blonde, you were the one she approached, and thus the quest is yours. He hath no right. Zoe interjected with a growl, this quest belongs to the hunters. Not some, the child of the womanizing god. Love you, too, Zoe-chan. Deadpanned the blonde guardian before he crossed his arms over his chest, so, how do we get this show on the road? You must choose 5 to join you, Kirin said as he wheeled around the table, and then your journey leads you west. A mix of campers and hunters, 2 I presume. Mr. D said from the opposite side of the room. He idly flipped through a magazine and answered the upcoming question, you're leaving Narnia, and so I might as well see you off, though one part does make me think, the guardian shall face his past. The magazine was lowered so that Mr. D's narrowed eyes locked on Naruto's body, what sort of past are you hiding from us? That made everyone look at the blonde as he clenched his jaw. Shaking his head, Naruto's next statement spoken stiffly and defensively, "My past isn't pretty or worthy of repeating, only a few I trust have been granted it." He wouldn't budge on the subject. But he did add, "And it's Naruto." Mr. D shrugged and went back to his magazine, whatever Nirvana. Naruto grumbled before looking at the lieutenant of Artemis hunters expectantly. A moment of silence passed, only broken by a nervous Grover's chewing of a tin can. "Fine, thou art the quest leader," Zoe reluctantly agreed with a growl. "I will gather 5 sisters and we will leave at dawn." "The hell you will." Thalia spat as she stood. "One camper is not plural, Nightshade. I'm going with you." "Thine mind must still be clouded from thine prison, Thalia Grace," Zoe shot back. "Thou shalt only hinder our movements." "I'll hinder your movement all right." Thalia growled as she stood with a clenched fist. Naruto stepped forward and held his hands up. "Hold on. If what I am slowly understanding is right, that means that I'm supposed to choose my group," the son of Apollo said, diffusing the situation for the moment. "Zoe, Artemis is your matron and leader, so I wouldn't think about leaving you behind. Choose another hunter and join us tomorrow at the gates by dawn." "Fine. Phoebe and I shall meet thou then. She is the best tracker aside from myself and a much better healer than thou," Zoe announced. Naruto nodded and she turned to leave before another voice stopped her. "Wait, Phoebe is the tall girl built like a tank, right?" Travis Stahl asked. Zoe slowly nodded, making him smile while Connor grinned, both boys gaining a glint in their eyes. Due to the tingling of a prank about to be sprung, Naruto took note of it and appeared behind Travis with the shirt once hidden by the brothers in his hand. He unrolled it and read it aloud. "The Artemis Hunting Tour 2004. Seriously? A tour shirt laced with..." Naruto sniffed the shirt a few times before coughing. "Ugh, gross. Centaur blood? How in the hell did you even get this?" Travis and Connor simultaneously faltered for an answer. Naruto shook his head and tossed the shirt to Chiron, who was scowling at the boys, before he clamped down on their shoulders. "I'll be right back," Naruto said to the council of counselors before he and the Stahl brothers vanished in a yellow flash. "Ugh, those boys don't know when to quit," Katie Gardner exclaimed with a groan. Percy and the rest looked at her while Zoe left to prepare her fellow hunter for their quest. Seeing that she had everyone's attention, Katie continued, "Those two were still sore about getting hurt in the capture the flag game. I heard them complaining about it as we walked in the big house." Percy glanced at where Zoe once stood and turned to grin at Athena's daughter. "Yeah, but it sure felt satisfying to beat the hunters." "Nice plan by the way, Annabeth." "I can't take all of the credit," Annabeth said sheepishly. Naruto helped point out what needed to be improved, even if it was a small thing like him guarding the flag. "How long do you think he'll be gone?" Silena Beauregard asked the others. "I think the question is what is he doing to the Stahl brothers?" Mark corrected with a chuckle. As if on cue, there was a chorus of pained screams echoing in the distance. Chiron looked outside the windows and narrowed his eyes, scanning the edge of the visible camp. He then looked at 2 specks slowly rising by the dining pavilion. To his strained eyes' relief, a light suddenly shone on the 2 specks. Reaching into his hanging satchel, Chiron retrieved a pair of binoculars. He looked at the specks and released a small laugh. "Well, at least we won't have to worry about the Stahl brothers acting up," Chiron said with a chuckle, before handing the binoculars to the closest counselor, who happened to be Katie. The dark-haired girl's equally dark eyes squinted through the binoculars before she started laughing. During her fit, she passed the binoculars to Charlie Beckendorf, who did as she did upon seeing what she and Chiron saw. The pattern continued until Percy received the binoculars, curious as to what had made Thalia, Grover, and Annabeth fall into fits of laughter. Peering through the darkness, he squinted before his eyes widened and a smile found itself on his face. Laughter shortly followed as he lowered the binoculars. Out by the dining pavilion, hanging from their feet in only their underwear, the Stahl brothers were hung in a snare, which was parallel to the head of the table belonging to Artemis hunters. Up on Olympus, watching the antics, Apollo, in his natural form, turned to his younger half-brother that was busting a gut. "I take it you approve of the predicament your sons are in?" Apollo asked the messenger. Hermes, laughing hysterically, lifted a finger and panted. Once he had calmed down to snickers, the god of messengers replied, "Why yeah. Oh man. That kid, he's a genius." "Indeed he is," Apollo said with a grin before boasting, "he gets it from me, of course." "Right." Hermes drawled with a smirk before he frowned, "Any luck on finding Artemis?" Apollo's good mood fell, "No. But that's why I suggested Oracle get my little maelstrom on the case. If anyone can find her, he'll get it done." "Yeah, but there's this thing called divine intervention. Ring any bells?" Hermes asked with an arched brow. "I didn't directly help Naruto," Apollo pointed out before grinning, "and besides, I never told Oracle to give him the quest. I just suggested she do so." "We need to hang out more," Hermes decided as he snickered at Apollo's method of bending the rules. "Indeed we do, little bro, indeed we do," agreed the sun god. Chapter 7. Naruto returned to a war room full of snickers, chuckles and giggles with an accomplished smile on his face. Dusting his hands in a manner that showed he was done taking out the trash, Naruto asked, "Would anyone else like to try and hinder the quest?" The teens shook their heads with smiles plastered on their faces. Naruto grinned and crossed his arms, "Good, then I can pick my group." The room hushed as he took a step to the side and leaned against the wall, his eyes closing and his head ducking slightly. The counselors waited with held breaths, all weighing in their own stances and what they could bring forward. Lee already knew that none of his siblings or the D'Angelo siblings would be accompanying his elder brother. For one thing, he was an archer on par with the hunters, so there wouldn't be a call for any more long-ranged warriors. And with him being a son of Apollo, Naruto could deal with most wounds. That left two things required for this quest, one of them being close combat, which again, Naruto was good at, the other being tracking skills. Granted, Naruto already had two hunters, girls trained by their aunt in the way of the hunt, but he'd need something else, something only one person present could bring to the table. There was no surprise on Lee's face when Naruto's unique eyes opened and locked on Grover. The satyr's own eyes widened and the cheesy ping-pong ball he was munching on was hastily swallowed. "Grover," Naruto started lowly, "what are the chances of your tracking spells being successful?" 75 to 80%, Grover replied with a soft voice, "Why? You're number one." Color drained from the already pale satyr's face and he swallowed dryly. There was a pause before Grover nodded and Naruto grinned, "Sweet. Now, I need two more dash." "I'm going," Thalia said sternly, her eyes flickering with determination and her body language daring anyone to say otherwise. Naruto sighed, but nodded. He looked around the room, everyone remaining silent as they knew what this meant. There was only one spot remaining in this quest. Mark chewed on his nail in nervousness and anticipation. He narrowed his eyes when he saw the blonde's eyes linger on the water boy. Percy Jackson. It was always Jackson. The blood of Ares boiled within him and before Naruto could speak, Mark stood and snarled, "Why should he go?" Naruto blinked in surprise at the interruption, allowing Mark to continue, "Jackson has been on his quest 2 summers ago. Then he interfered with Clarissa's last summer. Not this time." "Mr. Andrews Chiron started." "It's because Jackson wants to prove me wrong," Naruto replied with a frown. Eyes shifted from the diplomatic centaur over to the older demigod. "He's so stubborn, much like many of our parents, that he's willing to break the rules just to do so. He did so last year to save Grover, an admirable reason, but now it's personal, isn't it, Jackson?" Percy frowned, "No it's not." "Oh? So you wouldn't ever had tried to sneak out and help us? Not to save face? Would you do it if Grover or Annie were captured?" Naruto asked, challenging the boy to say otherwise. Percy frowned, well aware that had Annabeth or Grover been captured once again, he'd be foaming at the mouth to get in on this quest. Now though, he failed to see any reason why he should go. Annabeth's grey eyes stared at the blonde demigod, analyzing as always, trying to figure out why he was goading Percy. He could just say his name, declare his choice done and leave, but for some reason he didn't. He wanted to make it seem like Percy agreed to go on this quest, like it was his choice, not Naruto's. Granted, Annabeth was upset she wasn't considered, but she knew Naruto. He found her before Thalia and Luke. He was her brother in all but blood. He always had his own reasons for doing things. That didn't mean she agreed with the way he was goading Percy. "You are a very selfish person, Percy Jackson," Naruto said calmly, well aware that he was pushing Percy's buttons. "You took the quest for the Master Bowl not to save the world, but your mother. You blatantly left your fellow demigods to die while trying to save a friend. In short, you haven't learned an important lesson: the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." Percy looked ready to deck the older demigod, or try to anyway. It seemed only Thalia or Annabeth could hit him for some reason. Before he could attempt to stand, Naruto continued. "However," he said, "you didn't leave any of your friends behind in return for your mother and returned the lightning bolt. You stayed behind so Clarice could save the camp and outfoxed a misguided son of Hermes. You do understand the lesson I cherish more than the last: those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their precious people are worse than trash. A lesson my father passed through my homeland before he left. A lesson empowered by Lady Hestia herself. And it is because of that alone that I know I can trust you at my side, despite our differences." After memorizing and enjoying Percy's gobsmacked face and getting a nod, Naruto looked at Mark, who was calming down. "As to why I am not bringing a camper from Ares," he looked at Katie, who started to play with her hands and blush under his gaze, Demeters, a nod to Charles, who nodded back, Hephaestus, a wink to Silena, who blushed lightly and was briefly glared at by Thalia, Aphrodites, a glance at the window with a few snickers from the room, Hermes, a final glance at Annabeth, who nodded with disappointment on her face, or Athena's cabin. "I can explain it simply: I need you to protect my new home." The counselors sat straighter in their seats after that statement, and Mark slowly sat down. Chiron looked amazed while Mr. D calmly sipped from his Diet Coke, both looking at the blonde guardian with hints of approval in their eyes. Naruto rubbed his eyes and stepped forward before leaning over the table's edge. "Look, you aren't happy with it, but it's true. Lee already knows why I'm not bringing any from his cabin. The rest of you are needed here, to train and protect our home." "A good point," Chiron said, "Mr. You can call me Uzumaki. I'm still not used to the Namikaze name," the blonde admitted as the tense atmosphere in the room lightened from his sheepish statement. "Mr. Uzumaki," Chiron started again, "do you have a written copy of a schedule I can introduce to the camp?" Naruto grinned in a manner that unnerved those being left behind, making Lee whimper. "Oh, that and more, my dear Chiron," Naruto said with a chuckle, "that and more." The meeting closed shortly after that, and Naruto looked at the sky, frowning when the darkness started as his father traveled west. His aunt's planet was dimming, and was quickly following Sol's path, faster than it should have been. "Dad's working overtime to cover for Auntie Arte," Naruto mused with a frown. "Raijiji must still have him on probation for finding the loophole to the "no visiting" rule, otherwise he'd have a clone running both chariots." "Naruto." The blonde turned at his name and looked at his nervous younger brother. "Hey, I know you're leaving tomorrow, but, well, some of our sibs were wondering, would you like to join us in our cabin tonight?" A golden brow arched and his lips twitched upwards. "You're not trying to lessen the training, are you?" "Maybe a little," Lee admitted with a sheepish laugh, "but in all seriousness, would you? We're on edge. We all felt it, Dad flying over us faster than he normally does." Naruto nodded and brought his little brother into a one-armed hug, leading Lee back to his cabin. "Let's gather everyone up and talk. I'll leave a bunch in with Hades' children tonight." The two brothers walked back to the cabin of Apollo, idly chatting and talking about possible scenarios Naruto would find himself in. Above them, Percy Jackson rode a raven-colored Pegasus to who knows where in an effort to clear his head. Naruto stood next to Thalia with his arms crossed as they waited on Half-Blood Hill to get started on their quest. The hunters Zoe and Phoebe were on the opposite side, waiting impatiently and glaring at the current quest leader that was idly chatting with Grover. "And then what did Annie say?" Naruto asked, getting the full story behind the Lightning Thief quest rather than the summary he got from his employer. Grover chuckled and cleared his throat before he spoke in a high voice. "Just so you know, you drool in your sleep. I've never seen Percy so shocked in his life. $10 says he confesses when we get back," Thalia chimed in as Naruto laughed. The blonde's laughter stopped as a prank came to his mind. Like a master actor, he furrowed his brows in mock confusion. "Confess to who?" Naruto asked innocently. Thalia and Grover suddenly froze and looked at each other. They knew what Naruto was like when he was protecting Annabeth, and Thalia remembers what he said he'd do to any ex-boyfriends of Annabeth's. That led her to wondering what he'd do to Luke, and she shivered. Not a pleasant thought. It's a not-so-secret secret that, Percy, Grover stuttered before spotting the Annabeth and Chiron approaching the hill without said boy, sleeps in late. Naruto chuckled and patted the satyr on the shoulder. Relax, gee, I'm in the know. You'd have to be blind not to see it. See what? Annabeth asked as they approached. Naruto smiled at her and engulfed her in a hug. My cutest whittle sister in the whole wide world. The blonde exclaimed with a grin as he spun the surprised girl in a circle. Once he set her down, he held her at arm's length with a grin. I remember when you were just as tall as my leg, pretending to be tough while shivering in fear. Then there was that time you nearly pies dash. Shut up, Naruto. Annabeth hissed with a red face while Thalia was grinning at the potential blackmail. Or do you want me to talk about the goddess back in Frisco? Touché, little sister, touché. Quickly chuckled out the elder blonde as he released Annabeth and looked at Chiron, ignoring Thalia's curious glare. No, Percy. I'm afraid not, Chiron replied with a sigh. I've looked everywhere, and after gaining entrance to his cabin, I didn't find him. Which means you're one man short, Annabeth hinted with a smile. Naruto frowned. He looked at the others before he said, we'll be right back. Naruto grabbed Annabeth's shoulder lightly and they flashed away via Hiration. He led her a few steps deeper into the woods surrounding the camp before he turned and faced her. You can't come with me. I made my choice, Annabeth, he said softly. The girl frowned and if one looked, could see hurt in her eyes. Naruto sighed, I already chose 6, the prophecy mentions 6 turning to 5 anyway. Why risk it? I just want to help, the girl pleaded. Naruto hugged her and whispered, I know, Annie. I know. I need you here, though, to keep a level head and watch my family. You're the only one I can trust with that. But I'm stronger now. She protested through some sniffles. It's not fair. You can't leave me again, you can't. Naruto smiled softly and put a hand on her chin, making her look at him. Annie, I know it's not fair. You think I want to leave my little sister behind again? There's more going on than just this, though. Try to see that. Even Athena doesn't know all. Still not fair, the younger blonde sniffled and hugged him. Promise you'll come back, in less than 7 years. I dunno, there's a whole lot of fun things I can do in 7 years. Naruto trailed off before chuckling when she playfully hit him. I promise to come right back. And when you find that barnacle brain, tell him that he missed his chance to impress me, will ya? The younger girl giggled in response before she started to calm down. After Annabeth wiped the tears away, the two returned to the group in another flash of light. Naruto looked at Chiron with a furrowed brow. I just remembered something we should have addressed earlier. Isn't the winter solstice approaching? The annual meeting is in 8 days and Artemis needs to be there, the centaur insisted. Naruto nodded. A week should be enough time, he mused quietly before looking at his group. Anyone got an idea of where to start? West, obviously, Phoebe snapped, looking at Naruto with a glare while he rolled his eyes. You should know. You got the quest. Yeah, I did. And while I know going west is the endgame, we need more than that to go on, Naruto replied with a frown before looking at Grover. Any suggestions, Grover? I told you that we should dash. Phoebe, I know you're worried, but so help me Ria, if either of you talk down to me one more time, I'll leave you here in the most embarrassing way I can think of. Naruto snapped with a growl, making the two take a step back in surprise before narrowing their eyes at him. He took a minor breath through his nose before he spoke again. Grover, suggestions? Eyeing their current quest leader with concern and a hint of fear, the satyr said, well, the last spot we saw her was near DC, right? Why don't we start there? Picking up her trail, sounds good to me. The guardian replied before he looked at Chiron. I need 2 things before we go. First, tell Bianca and Nico that I'll be gone for a week and I want them to behave. Second, I need a car to drive to D.C. Naruto? Chiron asked as Naruto trailed off and spaced out. The fellow quest-goers each stared at the blonde as he seemed to be in his own world. Like old times, Naruto. The man from the previous dream asked as they locked eyes on each other. Attacking civilians, I didn't think you'd sink this low to get my attention. He called back with burning anger as they stood in a standoff outside the Smithsonian. What are you saying? A familiar younger demigod asked as several mercs readied their weapons. Just stay out of this, Jackson. You take the other guys, just hit them once. This one's mine. Naruto cried out as he rushed the man. The vision vanished and a loud clap of skin-on-skin contact echoed in the clearing. Ow! Naruto cried out upon being slapped before he looked at his attacker with a pout. Thalia-chan, that hurt. Well, if you didn't decide to visit La La Land while we were talking to you, you wouldn't have been slapped. Thalia scolded the teen with a growl and a raised fist. You're lucky I didn't punch you again. Personally, I think you just like hitting on me. Ow. Can't anyone take a joke these days? Naruto cried out as he rubbed his arm. Annabeth giggled at what she acknowledged as her two older siblings flirting. She leaned over to Grover and asked, You'll tell me if they kiss, right? Cross my horns and stab my thigh, the satyr replied with a nod and grin. 5 cans say she kisses him in 2 days. 10 drachma says they'll kiss after you find Artemis, Annabeth replied with a smirk. Who's going to kiss who? What art thou talking about? The curious hunters asked with furrowed brows. Naruto and Thalia Kyuf. I mean, nothing, Grover corrected himself after Annabeth elbowed him in the side. He rubbed his side and glared at her while the blonde girl smiled innocently. All right, break it up you two, Chiron said to the two bickering blue-eyed demigods. I got the keys to the van right here, Mr. Uzumaki. I believe now is when we say goodbye. So after a final farewell and a warning, threat, from Zoe concerning her hunter's safety, the quest for Artemis officially began with the 5 quest takers piling into a fairly nice-looking van. Naruto frowned at it but climbed in the driver's seat nonetheless. A few hours passed and Naruto sighed as another sports car zoomed fast. He supposed it was his father's blood in him, but he really wanted to drive something more stylish than a black van. He felt a bit like a creeper. You okay, Naruto? Grover asked from the back as he sat next to Thalia while she glared at Zoe, who was riding shotgun. Phoebe sat on Grover's other side, not fazed by Thalia or Zoe's rivalry, preferring to glare at the back of Naruto's head for reasons unknown, most likely due to her lady's requirement of anti-man policy. It's nothing. Ah, come on Chiron, seriously? You couldn't fill the tank before we left. He grumbled to himself as he looked at the gas gauge. Looking at Zoe, he said, we have to stop. Then do so, quickly. The sooner I am not working with thou, the sooner I know Milady is safe, Zoe rationalized. Naruto glanced at her oddly before he shook his head and exited at a stop where he could refill the gas. He took note of a SRT-8 Dodge Challenger colored a cobalt blue with black racing stripes parked nearby. A smirk crossed his face as he heard a catcall. Oh, he found a solution to his problem. Just a quick prayer first. Phoebe, Zoe, and Thalia grit their teeth as two pretty boys that could give Apollo's preferred form, pre-Naruto retrieval, a run for his money approached them. They looked at Naruto with a glare and sneered at Grover. Phoebe reached for her weapons but Naruto cut her off with a shake of his head. He instead approached the guys and said, Nice ride, guys, hey, feel up for a friendly gamble. The guys arched their brow and the apparent owner of the car stepped forward, Sure, what ya got in mind? Guess what I have in my hand and you can be accompanied by my 3 friends here, Naruto said, gesturing to the girls with his right hand, revealing keys dangling from his index. Thalia, Zoe, and Phoebe looked livid. Grover bit his lip to keep from bleeding in fear at the killing intent they were sending Naruto's way. The 2 guys, seeing what was in his hand, smirked at their luck. The owner asked, and if we lose? They get to kick your asses, Naruto said with a grin, knowing how they had already assumed the girls were the clique chicks at a local high school, all bark and no bite. How did he know this? A way to manipulate the mist he learned while studying under a friend of his boss. They didn't see the 3 tough-as-nail, infuriated girls ready for a bar brawl, but instead saw them as 3 teenage girls wearing revealing clothes and giggling. We're in. The boys cried out predictably. Naruto's grin turned evil and closed his fist. What's in my hand? he asked, ignoring the girls radiating murder behind him. You just lost big time, dude. Your van keys are in your right hand. The car driver proudly announced. Now, come on girls. A deal's a deal. In a way you're right, but you're also very wrong, Naruto said with a smirk as he held another set, one with a disco chain dangling from the ring. You see, these are my van's keys. And these, well, these are my new Challenger's keys. What? The former Challenger owner exclaimed as he searched his pockets for his keys. Hey. Give those back. Oh, I would, but I believe we agreed on what would happen if you lost. Girls, don't kill them, Naruto chuckled as he walked past the two guys, who suddenly pissed themselves as their impromptu shield walked away from them, allowing all of the girls' killer intent to come flying at them. Naruto's illusion dropped and all hell broke loose. Naruto walked out of the Rest Stops cafe with a latte in his right hand while a clone followed him, utilizing the mist to appear as a bipedal Chiron dressed in a nice suit. The blonde guardian snickered as the two teens were no better than a pile of crap. They were smears in the grass, still breathing but hurt immensely. The mist shifted around them to look like two gang members. Nodding to the incognito clone, he walked to the group of four. He took a sip of his latte before looking at the self-accomplished girls and Grover. We ready to go now? The girls glared at him upon his arrival and prepared to pounce. He raised a hand. Before you try to hurt me, let me tell you that I was playing them the whole time. Even if they had won by some miracle, you three could have kicked their asses, and then mine. I would have welcomed it. But they didn't. You got to use righteous feminine fury. Grover didn't crap himself and me. I just got a new ride in a latte. I'd say we came out pretty well. The girls gaped at him as he swiftly turned and approached the Challenger, raising the keys and pressing the alarm button. A quick beep beep and he was opening the driver's door, pushing the seat forward and gesturing to the open space. Ladies, and Grover, shall we save a goddess? Okay, that was smooth, Thalia admitted to herself as she ran over to the car and grabbed the shotgun seat. She grinned at Zoe in victory, but this was better. Eat that, Nightshade. Hope you enjoy your ride in the cramped back seat. Naruto winced and mentally apologized to Grover for the situation he was now in. Ah, well, he'll thank me someday, Naruto assured himself with a shrug as Grover hastily climbed in while Zoe and Phoebe hesitantly followed. Zoe sitting in the middle due to being shorter than Phoebe, if only by an inch. Naruto pushed the seat back, relieved that he wouldn't be squishing Phoebe and Zoe, nor would Thalia be squishing Grover. He carefully pulled out of the parking spot and then his father's blood raged. In the blink of an eye, he switched the radio on and grinned in anticipation. Jet black stares ready to roll came through the speakers as Naruto floored the gas and peeled out of the Rest Stop. The other riders went wide-eyed and Grover said what was on their minds. Are you crazy? Exclaimed the satyr as his hands clenched the seat and the wall. Maybe a little. Naruto laughed out as he sped past several cars and approached 100 on the speedometer. Next stop, Washington, D.C., baby. Give me room to run away. Why, feel like I'm ready to roll. Who? Chapter 8. Baywit dabba da bang a dang diggy diggy, diggy said the boogie said up jump the boogie, Naruto sang along with the radio as he raced down the highway. Next to him Thalia was shaking in a mixture of fear and excitement. In the back, Grover had passed out and was literally foaming at the mouth from the terror he was in while Zoe and Phoebe were trying to discern what was being said. Behind them, 5 highway patrol cars were racing after them with sirens wailing. As the guitar solo came on, Naruto glanced at the mirror and frowned. Tisk, the fuzz. Where's the mist when you need it? Reaching into his weapons pouch on his left leg, he pulled out a few small spheres. Guess, I really didn't think this through, Naruto mused as he twirled the spheres in his hand before casually dropping them outside the window. The spheres touched concrete and bounced before spikes popped out. The first highway patrol car blew out tires and came to a skidding stop, making 3 other cars crash into it. Thankfully, and miraculously, no one was killed. 3 down, 2 to go. Naruto acknowledged before seeing the DC lane approaching. With a grin he announced, time to drift. What? Thalia, Zoe, and Phoebe asked. Naruto didn't reply, preferring to crank up the radio as Kid Rock's Baywit Dabba repeated its chorus. Hold on. Naruto called out as he shifted gears and went into a turn. The car's rear end skidded before allowing the momentum to turn it in a glide. The nearest highway patrol couldn't turn as well, taking longer to follow. Doing so allowed the final police car to collide with it. Naruto grinned in the rearview mirror and made a subtle gesture that would have the mist rearrange the license plate. He looked at the clock and took note that the time was 1:40. Still a few more miles, Naruto mused before he looked at a shaken Thalia. Get some shut-eye, Thalia-chan. You're going to need it. Just follow Grover's example. Grover gurgled in his comatose state. On Zoe's other side, Phoebe passed out. See? He's without a care in the world, hell even Phoebe is following his example, Naruto joked as he turned the radio to a classic rock and Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion came on. Thalia looked at him like he had grown a second head before succumbing to the fading adrenaline rush. Minutes later, she had succumbed to Morpheus' calls. Thou art insane, Zoe finally murmured, regaining her voice and head as Naruto slowed the car down. Maybe a little, he admitted once again as he smiled at her in the rearview mirror, but it was fun. You are the most annoying man I've ever met, Zoe snapped with a frown. You wound me, cousin, mock pouted Naruto as he turned the radio down. He put a hand over his chest and looked at her in the mirror, right here. Cousin. Zoe replied with furrowed brows. Naruto laughed softly. Yeah, you're Artemis Hunter, right? Artemis is my aunt and she sees you as her child, hence we're cousins, he explained with a grin. Though we're not related by blood, I still think of you and the other hunters as my cousins. If that's the case, why did thee convince Bianca not to join us? Artemis Lieutenant asked with a frown. She would have been safe from pains thy strength couldn't protect her from. The reason I suggested she didn't join you was a factor you constantly ignore, Nightshade, the blonde shot back with a frown as they drove into the nation's capital. Bianca still had a brother that loved her and vice versa. Had I not talked to her, she'd probably taken you up on your offer, only to get distracted later on and die. A young boy would have lost a sister, a sibling. A pain even you can understand. Zoe clenched her jaw and looked at her hands before softly asking, how do you? My dad is the god of the arts, Zoe-chan, Naruto replied softly as his eyes went back to the road. Practically every story is in his library, true and false. I think he and my other aunt Athena have an agreement on shared space in the secret library beneath the Library of Congress. I had to go there once, worst 5 months of my life. While I was there, I found an interesting adaptation of Herc the Jerk's labors. Thy lips shalt not spread the truth or else thou shalt feel my wrath. The hunter hissed. Naruto nodded, I swear on the sticks that your past shall not escape my lips, Zoe-chan. An ominous thundering was heard despite the clear skies over the snowy Washington, D.C., letting the gods know that an oath on the sticks was taken. What does that suffix mean? Zoe inquired after a moment of silence between the passengers. Chan, thy use of it is confusing. Naruto chuckled and looked at her in the mirror slyly. It's a secret. Despite herself, Zoe smiled softly before her gaze turned stony and serious. Do you dash? Yeah, I feel it. Naruto replied as he pulled into a parking lot adjacent to the Smithsonian and they looked at the famous museums. Something big, dark, and strong is waiting for us in one of those buildings. We'll rest for an hour before we move in. Zoe merely nodded and shut her eyes, shortly following her fellow quest takers in the realm of Morpheus. Naruto hesitated, recalling the dreams he had been having for the past few days. More like visions. Damn, is this what she and him had to deal with? Naruto asked himself while looking at the sky, is this a joke of some kind or, are you trying to warn me, Dad? Against his wishes, he soon followed the others into Morpheus' realm. Naruto awoke with a start, sighing in relief that he didn't dream. He looked over at Thalia, reaching out and grabbing her shoulder. With a soft jostle, he whispered, time to get up, Thalia-chan. NGH. The raven-haired girl grunted, rolling to her side in her seat. Sleepily, Thalia protested, few emery mince whiskers. Naruto sighed and looked at the back seat. The others were still asleep, with Phoebe resting her head on the small window, Grover drooling on Zoe's shoulder, while Zoe nuzzled into Phoebe's shoulder. The blonde had to refrain from allowing his former sensei's influence reveal itself in a giggle at the two hunters' appearances. They were very cute when they weren't glaring at you. He looked at the clock and sighed. It was nearly 6 o'clock. 2 hours later than he wanted to wake up. They're going to kill me for this, but oh well, Naruto relented before he counted to 3. On 3, he slammed his hand on the car horn. Thalia gave a surprised scream while Grover bleated in shock. 2 daggers drove themselves through his seat and the tips struck his back. Naruto inhaled sharply as the very tips passed his skin. His hand went to his bracelet and a soft red glow came from it. After the daggers were withdrawn, he felt his back embrace the burning feeling that came from his cursed healing. He forced a laugh as glares came at him from around the car and explained himself, "Well, I had to get you up somehow. Thine sense of humor is amazing." Zoe drawled out before glaring at Grover, who she noticed had a trail of spit from his mouth to her shoulder. "If thou wishes to keep what makes thy a man, thou shalt never drool on me again." Sorry. My bad. Do you want me to clean it off? Oh okay. Okay. No drooling and no touching, got it. Do me a favor, Thalia? Get me out of the car. Grover screamed in a higher pitch as a dagger pressed itself against his disguised leg. Leave him alone, Nightshade. Thalia snapped before complying with Grover's urgent scream. Naruto sighed and rubbed his head before he got out as well and pulled the seat forward. Phoebe got out and nodded once to him, who he smiled at, before it fell into a frown as Zoe glared at him. "I shall drive next time," she informed him and followed up with a pointed poke of his chest, "That will be the drooling satyr's pillow. Are you sure you're not mad because it wasn't me on your shoulder?" He joked only to get a dagger sliced at him. Okay. So you're not a morning person, geez. The mist is thick today, Phoebe commented with a frown before kneeling down and running her hand through the snow, and the powder is shifted. Something powerful came through here. Naruto took a deep breath and embraced what little of nature he could with Pan's minor blessing, his pupils becoming rectangular slightly as he did. He exhaled and let it leave him, before he had a coughing fit from the faint dark taint in the air. He clutched his chest and looked at the National Air and Space Museum as he coughed. Grover and Thalia looked at him worriedly. "I'm fine," he reassured them with a soft cough afterwards. Clearing his throat, Naruto continued, "We're not alone. 2 strong taints are in there along with a familiar, come on. We have to go." He ran to the museum in question, jumping over the hood of an approaching car and ignoring it while his remaining quest takers called after him. He looked back at them before looking at the museum in question. He could teleport them there, but they don't have the blessing he and his father have to get through the Hyration without consequences. Well, Thalia might have, but the others didn't. Gritting his teeth, he called back at them, "Take the car, keys are in the ignition. I'll meet with you at the Air and Space Museum." Not waiting for a reply, he built chakra in his legs before taking what even Superman would call an impressive leap. Once again, he was aware that Thalia would probably grill him for how he did that, but at the moment he just didn't care. Not them. Anyone but them. "Please tell me I'm wrong," Naruto prayed to the Olympians as he raced towards the chakra signatures that he recalled all too well. Percy skid back as the guy with white eyes struck him with an open palm from behind. He groaned and recalled how he got into this situation. After saving the creature he named Bessie with Blackjack's help and talking to his mother about her new relationship, he arrived too late for the quest. Annabeth told him that they were heading for DC, along with other things he might have blocked out, so he headed there with Blackjack after he swiped Annabeth's Yankees hat. She'd probably skewer him for it, but he figured he could give it to Naruto as soon as they met up and pull a lie out of his ass, before it would backfire upon their return to camp. Percy arrived in DC at 5:35 and decided to explore the museums, having not been there before, and started with the National History Museum. It was outside the door that he spotted Thorn. Pulling Annabeth's hat out, he put it on his head and embraced the shadows, ignoring the shiver that went down his spine as he did, following Thorn stealthier than a ninja. Meanwhile, Naruto felt the urge to slap Percy upside the head. Thorn regrouped with a large man dressed in a business suit and Luke Castellan. Percy's eyes narrowed at his presence, wondering why he looked so pale. The businessman was revealed to be the general, and he revealed 3 adults all dressed oddly to help with the interfering son of Apollo, as Thorn called him, his voice filled with distaste. The strangely dressed adults had furrowed brows, looked confused, and then started speaking a type of Japanese. Luke looked wary at the three and asked how they could be useful if they were mere mortals. The general laughed and ordered the one wearing a green jumpsuit to kick one of the Cyclops standing guard as hard as he could in the head. Percy winced when he saw the kick snap the monster's neck, but he did notice the teen had hesitated for a moment. He wanted to hear better, and tried to sneak closer. That's when the woman with her hair in buns threw a knife in his direction. The white-eyed guy's eyes bulged and he said something that made the room look in his direction. So, an eavesdropper from the enemy. The general snarled before pointing at him, Hyuga. Seize him. Hi. The man said with a nod before racing towards him and jabbing 2 fingers in his direction. Percy was struck and his illusion fell, the Yankee's hat being sent sliding down the hall. Luke snarled at him. Percy Jackson. Kill him. Luke ordered. So Percy did what would work in most situations, he ran. Or at least, he tried to. Scum like you has no chance against the, Hyuga, The man, Hyuga, announced. Percy growled and reached into his pocket for Riptide, uncapping the pen as he pulled the weapon out. The blade extended and slashed outwards, but went right through the Hyuga like smoke. Oh man! Percy groaned as he capped Riptide again and turned to run. Only now, he didn't have to. Get down, Jackson! Naruto ordered as he leapt at the raven-haired teen. His fist was clenched shut and reared back. Percy ducked under the flying teen, allowing Naruto to punch Hyuga in the face and making the man stumble back from the blow as a tooth flew from his mouth. Naruto growled as he landed in front of Percy, separating his pursuers from him. Naruto narrowed his eyes and spoke, Team, Guy. What the hell are you three doing here? Naruto. The 3 adults cried out in a mixture of surprise and elation. Luke looked at the teen with wide eyes, "Na Naruto." Castellan. Naruto coolly said before he glared at Neji. He turned his head and without removing his eyes from his former accomplice, said to Percy, "Get out of here and go to the Air and Space Museum. The rest will meet you there. We'll talk about being on time in a bit. And leave you here alone. Just move, Jackson." Naruto barked. He glared at the occupants of the room, daring them to make a move as Percy started to retreat. He scowled at the monsters and the intrigued general, who sat forward in his makeshift throne. "So you're the sun god's offspring from the hidden continent?" The general asked, arching a brow on his chiseled face, not very impressive. Kill dash. Before he could order the blonde's death, a collapsible bow appeared in Naruto's hand and he fired multiple arrows at a time at the monsters in the room. Within seconds, showers of golden dust fell around them, while Team Guy stared in shock. Him. The general finished dryly before catching the arrow sent at him with one hand. The general bellowed in laughter before he looked at the blonde with a grin, "Impressive boy. Truly you have your father's skill. And you have your father's ass for a face." Naruto shot back with a scowl before glaring at Team Guy, "How did you ensnare them in your plan? Humph, where do you think the hidden land came from? Your grandfather and his brothers weren't powerful enough to create it, boy," the general sneered. "Figured as much," Naruto grumbled before he put his bow away and glared at Luke. "You're going to make your escape while I fight my old friends, Luke, but know this, if we ever meet again on the battlefield, I will kill you. I don't give second chances anymore." Luke's face twisted into a scowl. "You have one chance to join me, Naruto. You can take your offer and shove it up your ass." "Your loss, Uzumaki." Luke snarled back, "Kill him." Team Guy stared blankly at Naruto as Neji got to his feet and looked at the general. "Our contract is terminated. We will keep him from following you, and fulfill our part of the bargain as you have fulfilled yours. Tell your associate that he can no longer order us around." The general scowled before rubbing his nose as bridge. Damn shifty mortals, he forgot what a pain it was to employ people from the hidden lands. They weren't affected by the mist like regular mortals were, so they couldn't be tricked into working for them. Not to mention nearly all of them had traces of Titan blood in their systems, godly blood as well in a minority. "Fine." The general snapped, "We retreat." "But general. Now." The teen nodded in acceptance as he and the general exited through another room. Naruto tried to chase but was kept at arm's length by Lee as he leapt forward with a kick. The blonde guardian blocked the attack and snarled, "Stay out of my way, Lee. I have to get them." "I wish I could, Naruto-kun, but we're under orders from Hokage-sama herself to bring you home," Lee replied as he jumped back. "Let's just go. 7 years is far too long, my youthful friend." "Grr, damn it, Lee. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." 5 clones appeared alongside Naruto and they fell into the first stance of Frog Kata, the original muttering, "I don't have time for this. Just come back with us, Naruto." Tenten pleaded, reaching in her satchel for a few shuriken, "We're here to help you. If that were the case you'd have let me go after them." Naruto roared, "Attack." Lee ducked under a sudden high roundhouse, but didn't move fast enough to avoid the simultaneous sweep kick that a clone used. He fell to his back and quickly defended himself from multiple strikes. When he could, Lee used a handspring backflip to get out of the way. "Yosh. Your flames of youth are still burning brightly, Naruto. But you have to stop or I will use force," Lee warned as he fought. The original and clone double teaming him glared at the scarily similar Might Guy clone Rock Lee had grown into. The only thing off was his eyes, they were still freakishly big. Meanwhile, Neji scowled as he defensively fought against Naruto's clone. The blonde was using a style he hadn't seen before and was also using his bow in tandem. He went for a Gyuken strike to the side, but it was slapped away by the clone's hand. He went for a strike at the arm, but the clone redirected it with a backhanded slap. The bow suddenly collided with the side of his head. His growing temper reached the breaking point as he was struck by a ranged weapon. "Stop this childishness, Naruto. It's time to come home," Neji ordered as he jabbed at the clone. "Maybe I don't want to go. Maybe I've got things to do here," the original snarled as he used Kawarami to swap out with his clone, while the clones kept Tenten and Lee separated. Naruto spun his bow around so that the string was facing Neji. He leapt up as Neji went for a full-on palm strike to the shoulder and spun in the air. His arm wielding the bow shot out and Neji found out the hard way what an arrow felt like as Naruto flung the Hyuga over his shoulders with the additional help from his bow. Neji impacted with a statue of Aphrodite, nearly knocking the marble pillar over before he slid down with a groan. He stood and narrowed his eyes as Naruto clenched his teeth. "I don't have the time for this," Naruto raged as he and his clones regrouped and readied their bows. "That's it, I'm ending this. Hirashin no Jutsu." Lee, Tenten and Neji paled. Naruto's true heritage was revealed upon his 5th year as an missing-in-action shinobi, being the son of an elite kunoichi and the Yondaime Hokage. The news spread fast and now all shinobi villages were searching for the heir to the Namikaze estate just for this reason, to discern and replicate the infamous Hirashin no Jutsu that turned the tide of a war that they needed now more than ever. The fact that Naruto knew it now did not bode well for them. The clones and the original vanished in yellow flashes. Team Guy regrouped in the center and went back to back. Unfortunately, this sealed their fate, as the clones reappeared on the upper balcony with arrows drawn. "Fire!" Naruto ordered as he released one of his specially crafted arrows. They were gifts from his uncles Hermes and Hephaestus. There were several variations, but the one he was using right now "Yosh, it is sleeping gas," Lee announced as he covered his mouth with his arm, quickly being copied by his teammates. "Flammable gas," Naruto corrected as he pulled an arrow blessed by Hephaestus out and it ignited with Greek fire, "A gift from my uncle." Neji's eyes narrowed in confusion. From what he knew and was briefed on, the Yondaime was a war orphan found by a returning leaf kunoichi. Did Naruto find the original home of the Yondaime when he was abducted? There were so many questions, and due to their apparently irrational choice to take the mission that specifically named Naruto as a possible foe, Neji felt that the blonde wouldn't be answering those questions anytime soon. "Fire," Naruto ordered softly as he let the arrow fly. Neji's eyes widened and he activated the kitten, deflecting the arrows and clearing the gas from his team. As soon as he stopped, however, an arrow landed directly between his feet. It had an odd cylinder protrusion just beneath the tip and he swore that he heard beeping. Tenten's eyes narrowed as she studied the arrow. "Neji-kun, is that arrow beeping?" Boom. Naruto lowered his arm from his face after the low-powered explosive arrow went off. The members of Team Guy were out cold in the center of the room, making Naruto frown. He leapt down and prepared another arrow while his clones kept more explosive arrows at the ready. Naruto reached Neji first and checked his pulse. Still alive. He put a hand on the Hyuga's head and softly whispered. God of medicine, grant me this favor, show me this man's injuries, for your skills never waver. Naruto's eyes shut as a picture of Neji's body appeared in his head. Colors of red, yellow, and orange appeared all over. Yellow showed minor injuries, orange intermediate and red being critical. Neji's head was critical, but that was from the flash of the explosion. Naruto felt bad about nearly blinding his old friend, but he was on a mission that opposed the Hyugas. After checking Lee and Tenten for injuries, Naruto bound them in a roll of ninja wire he found in Lee's pouch. He then wrote a quick letter in Greek and slapped it on Lee's head. A brief flash of light later and the 3 Konoha shinobi were back in their village, just outside the hospital. Thanks Uncle Herm. Naruto called to the ceiling before he left that museum and headed for the Air and Space Museum. He had a water boy to chew out and a chewing out of his own to get through. On Olympus, Hermes was zipping through the halls and ducked past the muses, hurrying towards his brother. He arrived at the entrance to the sun god's quarters and barely managed to duck underneath a bust of said god's head as it was thrown out of the room. Apollo snarled in anger as he stood over a desk with a map belonging to his twin on it. He growled to himself, "Come on, I should have found her by now. What kind of prophecy god am I?" Apollo. Hermes asked as he entered, "You just threw your 4th era head out the door, you alright?" "No. No, I'm not alright." The elder god snapped as he looked at the god of messengers, "I've been searching for days, scouring her favorite hunting spots when I drive the chariot and trying to peer into the future for any hints, but I've gotten nothing." "Calm down, anger doesn't suit you," Hermes said to his brother, "that's Ares' thing." Apollo took a deep breath before he sighed and rubbed his head with one hand. I suppose you're right. I can't fail her, not like I did last time. Not like I did with Orion. What happened back then wasn't your fault, Apollo," the younger god said softly. "Listen, I know this is the wrong thing to say but, just take a few days off. Let Naruto and the demigods find her." "Yeah, speaking of my little fish cake, what's he been up to?" Apollo asked, trying to get his mind off his twin sister if only for a moment. "He sang to me a moment ago, but I just pulled an auto grant on that request." "It's as we feared," Hermes said after a long silence, "the hidden nation is being contracted by the enemy. Naruto just fought 3 Konoha in." Apollo frowned. "He had you send them back, didn't he?" "He did," Hermes replied. "It's only a matter of time before they contract Iwagakure." Apollo turned away and looked over at a picture of his son, his Genin graduation picture, on a wall amongst several other children. These were the ones he favored over the years, the ones for who he felt the most pride and the most guilt. Another picture was right beside Naruto's, the picture that the teen in question kept on his person at all times. Apollo walked over to the wall and ran his hand over Kushina's face and thought, "Our son is going to deal with my sins, please forgive me, Kushi-chan, because I won't be able to help him this time." Chapter 9. Naruto ran out of the Natural History Museum just in time to catch sight of a disguised Cyclops carrying 5 kittens. Now normally, he would have just either ignored the sight or attacked and then left, but the kittens had something he couldn't get enough of. Orange fur. Orange fur. Mine, 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 mine. The eccentric teen thought as he adjusted his footing and built chakra up in his legs. Time for a food cart destroyer. Naruto leapt up almost 20 feet into the air and arced slightly before coming back towards the ground feet first. Using the small gap between his feet as a ridicule, Naruto aimed at the side of the Cyclops' head. A second later, and his feet collided with the force of a freight train behind them thanks to gravity's intervention. The Cyclops went flying and as a result, the kittens were dropped in the snow, mewing adorably out of freight. Naruto grinned as he watched the Cyclops soar into the nearest tree, and through it. That one would be waking up with a bad headache. The blonde's unique eyes looked down at the kittens and he grinned. Cute and orange? That would be what his dad would call a win of epic proportions. Kneeling down, Naruto picked the closest one up and examined it. Two small fangs protruded from its upper jaw and came out over the bottom. Almost like no, that'd be stupid. I should ask Dad if he has any prehistoric animals as a symbol, because if he doesn't, well he does now. Naruto mused as he began stroking the little cat's head and getting a purr in response. As much as he wanted to continue playing with the kitten he dubbed Ranger, Naruto knew that he had to get a move on. And so with another piece of paper and his spare blanket, Naruto gathered the 5 kittens up, comfortably wrapped them up and put the new address on the blanket. But not before he ripped a piece of his shirt off and used it to mark Ranger as his. A second later, Chiron looked down as a bundle appeared before him, moving and oddly enough mewing. Grabbing the piece of paper hastily pinned to the blanket by a ninja knife, the centaur read the message before paling. To his fear, one of the kitten heads popped out and mewed at him. What Mr. D told you was partially true. However, Chiron would later proclaim after he revealed the kittens to the campers, I did not, nor will I ever, scream like a little girl. He then dispersed the remaining 4 kittens to the Athena cabin, a gift specifically for Annabeth and to act as a cabin guard when older. The Aphrodite cabin, because they nearly demanded they have one, would then lend the cat to Hephaestus cabin once grown, the Demeter cabin, for the same reason as Athena's new kitten, and the last kitten went to the hunters of Artemis as a gift from their cousin. The Hades and Apollo cabins would share responsibility over Ranger until Naruto returned. Back at the plot, Naruto resumed his journey to the Air and Space Museum, arriving through the doors and easily spotting his group. Thalia and Zoe were nearly butting heads, but Grover and for some reason Phoebe were holding them back. This struck him as odd as Naruto assumed Phoebe would have let Zoe get in a fight with the raven-haired demigoddess. The blonde then took note of the nervous Percy standing to the side, looking guilty and shifting uncomfortably. Jackson! Naruto called as he approached the boy, grabbing the front of his shirt with both hands and lifting him off the ground. Where the hell were you, huh? And what the hell are you doing with Annie's cap? I was called out to help a friend the night before you left, Percy replied before looking around, and, Annabeth, lend her hat to me. Naruto's eyes narrowed before he sighed and released Percy, letting the boy fall to his ass. The blonde pinched the bridge of his nose with a sigh of irritation. So he now has a late quest member that stole a very important item from his little sister, along with a satyr that reminded him of the cowardly lion at times, a punk demigoddess that was in the midst of a spat of some kind with a women are holier-than-thou hunter, and another hunter that seems to be on the fence of hating his guts due to his gender or some other personal issue. Then he has the shinobi to worry about. He had thought of them before his life as a demigod changed for the worse, i.e. dying, but lately they hadn't been much of a thought. Of course the Titans would know about the elemental nations, it was home to the perfect mercenaries one could ask for if said employer was supernatural. The new question on his mind was, how did Team Guy end up in Washington, D.C. in the first place? The other members of the group, who had stopped to watch Naruto and Percy's interaction, were now staring at their leader questionably. Where were you, Whiskers? Thalia all but demanded as she stepped forward. Checking out the Natural History Museum, Naruto said with another sigh before looking at Percy, found that idiot facing our old friend Luke and the general. He was here? Was Lady Artemis with him? Phoebe inquired. Naruto shook his head. Auntie Arte is still to the west, but they were here for a reason. The blonde crossed his arms and frowned, and they were packing some secret weapons. Hey, who were those guys anyway? Percy asked, getting all eyes on him. The raven-haired boy sighed and told them what he had heard and seen before leaving the Natural History Museum. He described the sickly Luke being ordered around by the general, the death of Thorn, and then he brought up the subjects that made Thalia glare at Naruto. The one with big eyes said his name happily, like he was seeing an old friend after a long time. Percy finished, making Naruto glower at him. Great, now I'm going to let go of my ear. What are you, my mother? Naruto asked as Thalia grabbed the appendage and pulled him down. Who were they? Thalia asked through gritted teeth, tell us. We have a right to know, Percy said with a frown, if they're helping the Titans dash. They are not helping the Titans. Naruto snapped as he slapped Thalia's hand away. He glared at the group, they're my problem, all right? If they show up again, I'll deal with them myself. If they were keeping thou from pursuing Castellan and the general, Then thine foes were helping the Titans, Zoe said with a frown, they are our problem. She's got a point, Naruto, Grover pointed out, like it or not, they're our problem now, too. I won't, does anyone else smell catnip? Naruto asked as he sniffed the air. The hunters followed suit and Grover's eyes widened as he took in the scent. Don't change the subject, Whiskers. Thalia growled only for her ire to be interrupted by Phoebe who was looking up. He's not changing the subject, he's saving our lives. Everyone move. The hunter ordered. The 6 teenagers moved out of the way as a shadow covered them and a roar hit their ears. Landing in place where they used to be was a lion, large enough to be a pickup truck. Its fur nearly matched Naruto's hair in color, but glistened and gave off a more molten gold appearance, as its claws shined and looked silver. Gleaming fangs were exposed and dripping with saliva. Oh great! Naruto grunted as he pushed himself to his feet. He looked at Zoe and called out, Zoe! You and Phoebe get to higher ground. Cover us. While she didn't enjoy being ordered around by the blonde demigod, Zoe did as she was told. She helped Phoebe get to her feet and they retreated to the stairway. Meanwhile, Thalia and Percy were deflecting the lion's claws with their weapons. Naruto grabbed Grover by the arm and pulled him to his feet. You have got to lay off the enchiladas, G. Get to cover. What are you gonna do? Grover asked as the blonde turned and pulled out his bow. I'm gonna skin me a lion, Naruto replied as he pulled an arrow back and let it fly. To his shock, the arrow bounced off the large cat's fur like it was nothing. Groaning, he notched another explosive arrow and flicked the side of the nock. The arrowhead was primed and started to beep. Thalia-chan. Jackson. Incoming. Naruto warned as he let the arrow fly. The 2 demigods turned and saw the blonde release his weapon of choice. It landed right beneath the lion's forepaws. The lion looked down just as the weapon detonated, making it roar in pain at being blinded. Its swipes became more violent and vicious, but wild and unfocused, allowing the 2 demigods to regroup with Naruto. What is that thing? Percy asked through his panting. Naruto notched another customized arrow and replied, the Nemean lion. Don't you read? Dyslexia. That's not an excuse, Naruto replied with a grunt as he sent the arrow flying and it passed through the armor like skin into the lion's shoulder and he groaned, tank-piercing tips work. Seriously? I've only got 5 of those things. Why? Thalia asked curiously. Naruto looked at her and absently fired a flashbang arrow. Why not? He countered, situations like this for one. Then use them. Percy urged. Thalia looked at the boy like he was an idiot. What if we have to deal with something harder than that thing's skin, Percy? Oh, right. Sheepishly replied the teen before he looked around. Arrows were flying at the lion from all sides, keeping it in place as it roared in defiance. How was it defeated last time? Percy asked, racking his brain for ideas. Herc the jerk choked it out, Naruto replied as he reached for another arrow. Hey, Thalia-chan, why don't you go try? Pass, Thalia replied as she watched one of Phoebe's arrows get crushed beneath the lion's massive paw. You wanna go take a whack at it, barnacle brain? No thanks. Percy's eyes landed on the food stand and he said, cover me. I've got an idea. Glad you do. Naruto called back before looking at Thalia, you gonna go help him or not? I'm not suicidal, the girl countered before glaring at him, unlike some people. Not the time, Thalia, Naruto replied with a frown as he took another shot. The lion roared in annoyance. Naruto felt at his quiver and did a count. He scowled, shit. I'm running low and the rest of my things are sealed away. He looked at the hunters. Foe-chan, Zoe-chan, how are you on arrows? Foe-chan. You bastard, don't give me a nickname. Phoebe snapped as she fired off another shot. If this continues we'll be out of this quiver. We have more stored up, but I'd rather not lose a full quiver of arrows to a mangy cat. Zoe replied before glaring down at the blonde from her spot on the stairs, do not give nicknames to the hunters, Uzumaki. You girls are no fun, Naruto replied before his eyes widened and he wrapped an arm around Thalia's waist, down. The two of them dropped to the ground as the Nemean lion swiped a chunk of the ground in their direction. Thalia blushed lightly as Naruto held her against him before pushing herself off of the blonde. "Thanks," she murmured as she helped the guardian to his feet. "Not a problem, Thalia-chan," Naruto replied before he notched another arrow. He grinned at her as the arrow flew. "I live for pretty girls pressing themselves against me. You perverted bastard." Thalia snapped as she glared in his chuckling direction. "Blame the genetics and my teachers." Naruto shot back as he shoved her out of the way of a claw swipe. "Pay attention. I'm going to kick your ass, Whiskers. Now is not the time to flirt, you guys," Grover called as he chucked random items at the lion. "We are not flirting," Naruto and Thalia shouted back. The Nemean lion roared and the two faced it. "Shut up, you giant carpet." Grover blinked and called from his cover, "You two sound like an old married couple. I'm gonna skin you if you keep it up, goat boy." Thalia warned as she deflected a swipe with her shield. "Where's that barnacle brain?" "Dunno, hey, watch it, fuzzbutt. But he seriously needs to hurry up," the blonde demigod replied. He reached for another arrow and paled when he only felt one in his quiver. Pulling it out, he examined it. It was a regular hunting arrow with a large gleaming arrowhead made of celestial bronze. He didn't have time to search for his scroll of quivers, so he had to make this one count. Looking over in the direction the son of Poseidon ran in, he saw what Percy did, and his gears began to turn in his head. Percy ran out from behind the snack bar, ready to shout, when Naruto shouted before him, "Hold that thought, Jackson." The younger demigod did as requested while watching the older boy slide under a swipe of the Nemean lion's paw and launch another flashbang arrow. The next blind attack was avoided as Naruto flipped over it. Naruto dove under another swipe stopped next to Percy, who was gaping at him. Naruto nodded to the younger boy and dropped into a crouch while preparing his last shot. Percy got the message and looked at the lion, preparing his secret weapon. He then said the first thing that came to mind, "Your mother was a fur coat." "Oh, scathing," Naruto chuckled as he joined in the jeering, "King of the jungle, my ass. My sisters are more threatening than you. What's wrong, you forget how to roar? I'd thought I'd be shaking in my shoes by now. Yeah, come on, give us a roar, kitty cat. Roar. Damn it, roar you worthless piece of cat shit." The Nemean lion faced them and its mouth opened wide in a roar that shook the foundations of the building. "Now Jackson." Percy cocked his arm back and let the contents of his hand fly right into the creature's mouth, delivering an ice-cold sandwich right down the Nemean's throat. The giant jungle cat's eyes bulged and it started to hack. Naruto pulled his arrow back and his eyes narrowed. His arms strained as they held the arrow in place, waiting for the right moment. "Wait for it." Anytime now, Naruto," Percy said nervously as he took a step back from the lion. "Not yet," Naruto replied as he started to get tunnel vision. "Take the shot, Whiskers," Thalia shouted from across the room. The lion's mouth opened wide as the reflexive hairball started to come up. Naruto's eyes widened and he released the arrow, which flew faster than a bullet. To the surprise of the watching teens, it pierced through the roof of the lion's skull and out the back of its head with a bit of pink tissue on it before it lodged itself halfway in the wall. The Nemean lion's body reared back onto its two hind legs from the strike before it fell forward, Naruto and Percy right beneath it. Percy reacted faster than Naruto and shoved the older boy to the side, consequently also pushing him out of the way. The body of the giant cat hit the ground with a loud booming thud. The questing sextet waited with held breaths before a collective group sigh escaped their lips as the lion dissolved into golden dust. What remained surprised them. The first item was a duster that was a light golden brown. Naruto immediately deduced that it was the modern-day replacement for the pelt that the jerk had received. The other item that remained was a pair of daggers forged from the beast's claws. "Dibs on the jacket," Naruto cried as he raced forward and picked the items up. He then tossed Percy the daggers. "Here, Jackson. Your spoils of war." "Wah, but I didn't do anything," Percy protested as he caught the two weapons. "You killed it." "You got it to open its mouth," Naruto said as he pulled the duster on and rolled up his other jacket. "Yeah, this'll do nicely. How do I look?" "Looks good on you, Whiskers," Thalia admitted with a smirk. "Bet it'd look better on me." You sure you don't want the daggers? Percy asked. You could probably use them better than I could. You just need practice, Jackson, Naruto insisted as he examined the jacket and began muttering to himself, now, all I need is to apply a few seals and this will be the perfect jacket. But I already have riptide, Percy protested as he held the two daggers out. To his surprise, they changed into thin wristbands. Whoa. Yeah, but you should be proficient in more than one weapon, Naruto replied as he reached into a side pouch and dug around for something. As he did that, he looked at the approaching remainder of quest-goers and asked, Hey Grover, could you deal with the security guards? Done and done, Grover said as he polished his reed pipes, they'll snap out of it in a bit, but right now, all they're doing is running into a wall. Literally or figuratively. The first one. Oh, that's hysterical, Naruto snickered as he pulled a scroll out of his pouch and opened it up. Before he did anything else, he looked at the hunters and asked, Zoe-chan, Foe-B? You girls set for arrows? We're always prepared, Phoebe replied with a frown, our secondary quivers are in our bags. Ah, yes, backpacks, Naruto replied with a chuckle as he knelt down and set the scroll down, you primitive beings still use those, don't you? Allow me to show you the easier way of carrying items. The group gathered around, curious as he unrolled a portion of the scroll, revealing a strange symbol with various squiggled lines. Percy and Thalia wondered if it was their dyslexia acting up, while Phoebe and Zoe began examining the seal. Grover just stared in awe, amazed at the art before him. Unknown to them, he built up a portion of chakra in his lungs before he said, Fuinjutsu, Kai. A poof of smoke appeared over the symbol and a quiver suddenly appeared atop the paper. The two hunters gasped while Percy gaped. Thalia chuckled as she recalled the first time she had seen it and Grover chimed in, that's so awesome. Noda, Naruto replied with a grin before he placed his old quiver over the markings. With another chakra-channeled breath, Naruto sealed the old quiver away. He rolled his scroll back up and stored it away in his pocket before he stood. Grinning at Percy, who was still in awe, Naruto then offered, I could teach you if you want. Waha. Consider it payback for saving our necks with the ice cream, Jackson, Naruto said before he froze. His eyes widened impressively before narrowing and glaring in a direction. Shoulders tensed and fists clenched as Naruto bared his teeth. The other 5 quest-goers followed his gaze and only Percy paled as he recognized the symbol on the scarred headband that the man wore. It's been a while, Naruto. A few moments earlier on Olympus, Apollo was walking away from the seeing pool after he watched his son and Poseidon's boy kill the Nemean lion. At the rate they were moving, the 6 wouldn't make it to his sis in time, let alone back to Olympus. Someone had to make a move to help the kids. Apollo sighed and rubbed his head. Would it be worth the headache for interfering on a quest? The Fates, who were charged with warning the gods of their places during quests, would possibly give him the worst hangover ever. Even worse than that time he and Jiraiya went to town following the Third War and his coronation as the 4th Fire Shadow. It'd be worth it, Apollo decided after a moment to think as his eyes hardened. Under his breath, he recited the mantra he developed as Minato Namikaze, those who break the rules are trash, but those that abandon their comrades are worse than trash. Hang on Artie, Apollo thought as he ran from his temple on Olympus to his chariot, your brother's on his way. Damn the consequences. Chapter 10. You. Naruto growled as he reached for his bow. He suddenly found himself frozen and the world around him turned red and black. The other members of the quest became colorless before fading away into nothing, leaving Naruto alone. The man with his one red eye revealed chided as he waggled a gloved finger, that's not how you greet old friends, Naruto. You're not my friend, you sadistic psychopath. The blonde spat as his eyes narrowed, my father warned me about you. He, the man giggled as he stepped forward into the red-lit world, wearing something similar to Konohagakure's Umbu armor. His right eye was uncovered, and this person had a Sharingan eye in the right socket, 3 black tomo spinning within the red iris. His face was youthful, yet pained, and the man had raven hair that was just as spiky as the blonde's used to be. An old and scarred Konohagakure headband covered his left eye, similar to his old sensei Kakashi. The feature Naruto recognized from his father's description, however, was the orange spiral mask hanging at his waist. I'm sure he did, the man replied, his transition to English seeming flawless, save for the barest accent that Naruto shared. The man's mouth turned upwards in a cracked smile. That father of yours is quite the prophet, though he seemed to have faltered when he was the Namikaze. What do you want from me, Uchiha? Naruto asked, his eyes narrowed, or are you here under a master's orders? You're just as gifted in sight as your father, the man chuckled insanely, however, you're just as blind. I come with an offer, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Give me the power of the nine-tailed fox, and I can ensure that the crooked one never rises again. Naruto felt his throat dry and a cold chill go up his spine. To ensure that the crooked one never rose. It was tempting, very tempting. Naruto then had a vision of worldwide panic, his friends from his old home and his new one now lying dead before him. Fire was rising around the remains of a city, most likely New York. His father and aunt's chariots were falling towards the ground. Olympus was crumbling, but it wasn't due to the Titans. A giant creature with 10 limbs protruding from its backside was smacking the big three's corpses around. A giant eye, red and ringed like Nagato's, but with 3 tomo on each ring was suddenly in his line of vision. The eye narrowed and an infuriated voice hissed out 2 words. Free me! Naruto gasped after Thalia slapped him upside the head. He grabbed at the spot and then looked around. The room's colors had returned and the other members of the sextet had been unfrozen. All of it had been a dream, just like before. Just like with Itachi several years ago. I await your response, Naruto-kun, the man said before a giant void opened up behind him and he stepped through it. Naruto glared at the spot before holding his head and glaring at the one that struck him. What the hell, Thalia-chan? Naruto asked the girl that was returning his glare with equal amounts of determination/anger. Her anger peaked and Thalia exploded. Who are the people that attacked the kelp head over here? Who was that? I'm sick of all this cloak and dagger shit, Naruto. Tell me what happened after you left. Naruto's jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed. I don't have to tell you anything, Thalia Grace. We aren't leaving until you do. Thalia shot back, undeterred. Grover and Percy exchanged glances of concern and worry as they heard thunder start to boom. The hell we aren't. Phoebe replied, butting into the conversation, Lady Artemis needs to be at the winter solstice meeting. Stay out of it, Hunter. This is between us. Thalia snapped, causing a lightning bolt to strike down nearby. This is getting out of hand, Naruto thought as he took note of the storm brewing outside. Either Raijiji is listening in on us, or Thalia's gifts are linked to more than just lightning. You know what, Thalia, I will tell you, but not right now, Naruto gave, praying to his father and grandfather that it would sate the girl's anger. It didn't. No. It's always later with you. I want answers now. Thalia demanded, almost childishly, as she rounded on him. Okay, so she's more like Raijiji than I anticipated, Naruto thought before he realized something. Cripes, she was turned into a tree when she was what? 12. 13. Did she mentally mature or just physically, is she? Please, whoever's listening to this, Aphrodite, Antiarte, Athena, Hera, or even you Hestia, please someone tell me that it isn't that time of the month. And sure enough, he was reassured. This is why I told thou that men art hopeless. Thou should have joined us when I asked, that way thine feelings wouldn't be risking Lady Artemis' life. Thanks to Zoe's big mouth. You wanna run that by me again? Thalia asked coolly. Naruto, Grover, and even Percy all had one thought. Catfight. Thy feelings for Uzumaki and, vice versa I believe the term is, are making the act irrational, Zoe continued with a frown before her nose scrunched up, 'tis almost as bad as a daughter of Aphrodite. Oh you are so dead, Nightshade. Thalia snarled as she tried to rush the girl with her fist cocked back. Naruto slipped behind the enraged raven-haired girl before pinching a point at her neck, making her fall unconscious and catching her with his arm. Sighing in relief, the blonde then picked the unconscious teen up and carried her towards the doors, with the other 4 quest-goers following. She's going to be real pissed when she wakes up, isn't she? Percy asked his friend quietly as they followed their apparent leader. Grover bleated as his nerves started to calm down. Yeah, maybe Naruto should just kiss her and see if that helps. Percy stared at his friend with disbelief. Dude, even I know that's a dumb idea. Worth a try, though, right? The satyr said sheepishly. Inwardly he thought, so much for that plan. Man, Annabeth better not win this bet. I really want more tin cans and I don't have a lot of drachma left on me. Percy looked ahead and why's she so mad, anyway? Does she like Naruto or something? This time it was Grover who stared. The satyr shook his head with a sigh. Sometimes. I forget why I'm your friend, Percy. And it's questions like that remind me that you need the occasional smack upside the head. Like so. Ow. You could have just said yes. Complained the son of Poseidon as he rubbed the back of his head after the hard thwack he received. Grover merely shrugged, that's not as fun. Besides, Annabeth would have done the same thing. You've got a point there, the teen admitted before looking at the blonde. What's she see in him though? He's an ass, secretive, and well, to be honest he reminds me of Luke. Grover quickly covered Percy's mouth and frowned at the boy. He looked at a still walking Naruto, who was oblivious to the world as he carried Thalia back towards the car, before looking back and warning, don't ever let him hear you say that, Percy. Naruto he wasn't always like he is now. Time and circumstances change people. He might be a jerk, okay, he kind of is a jerk only to you, but you're not exactly the best example of a camper. What do you mean? Percy asked as Grover let him go. I'm saying this as your friend, Percy, Grover said softly as they slowly resumed walking. Some of the things back at camp made me think. You're really not educated in our world, but it's not your fault. You might have been sheltered more than the other demigods. It's kind of unfair if you think about it. Both to you and the others. What do you mean, sheltered? You mean like how we avoided monsters? Percy shuddered at the thought of his mother's ex. Kind of, but the fact that your mother allowed you to remain ignorant of so much, Percy, if you had more information on some kindly ones, if your mother pushed you to pay attention in school, can you say you would have remained hidden until you were 12? The son of Poseidon had no response for that. He thought about all he had been through, all that had happened on his quests. As he thought it over, Naruto's words at camp came back to mind. In short, you haven't learned an important lesson, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. I was selfish, but you do understand the lesson I cherish the most. Those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their precious people are worse than trash. Those are words that everyone should live by, Percy mused before looking at Naruto's back. Why are you so secretive, though? Come on, Jackson. Let's get a move on. Naruto called over his shoulder, we still need to go west. They entered the lot to a depressing sight. Naruto's new challenger was in flames, and the cause of it was another face that got a reaction from Naruto. This one was one of betrayal, anger, excitement and disbelief all at once. Percy however groaned at the sight of another headband-wearing person. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto whispered. The man turned towards him and his lone eye widened in surprise. Unlike the last person with a covered eye, this man had gray hair that defied gravity and his face was hidden from the bridge of his nose down thanks to a navy blue mask that blended in with his shirt and slacks. He had a olive green flak jacket much like Lee and had two fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back of them. His legs were taped from the middle of his shin down to where his sandals began. Naruto quickly fumbled his hands together while still cradling Thalia and made a clone. He handed the girl in his arms over to his duplicate before taking a step towards the man. Kakashi recovered from his initial shock and gave his old student an eye smile and a laid-back wave. Ohio, Naruto. Uzumaki, who is this man? Zoe asked quietly as she and Phoebe prepared their bows. My old teacher, Naruto replied just as softly. He stood twice an arm's length away from Kakashi, both now tense and prepared to jump. We've been very worried about you, Naruto, Kakashi finally said. Naruto nodded in understanding. I've been busy with family issues, the blonde replied before he frowned. I can't go back just yet, sensei. I figured as much, Kakashi sighed out before he leaned against the charred remains of the car, but Tsunade-sama won't like it if we just parted and went our separate ways without an explanation. Family business, Naruto replied without haste, making Kakashi blink. Naruto bit his lip. Dads, I can't say, but whatever deal you have with your current employer, you have to drop. They're bad people, sensei, . Well, I suppose I should send a message back to Tsunade-sama, then, Kakashi drawled before he narrowed his eye at the teens behind the blonde. You're, squat. You could say that, the blonde answered as his hand slowly reached behind his back. Where's yours? They're around, Kakashi drawled, glancing at the ground and back at Naruto pointedly. Uzumaki. Stop speaking gibberish and let's get a move on. Zoe ordered as she and Phoebe prepared to cover the blonde. Gimme a minute. Naruto called back over his shoulder, not once taking his eyes off Kakashi. Sensei, why did you blow up my car? To be completely honest with you, Naruto, that wasn't my fault, Kakashi said as his left hand slowly came out of his right pocket. The Jonin's eye stared at him with mirth. I didn't know it was yours. My team tracked it. Right, drawled the blonde in disbelief, before he called over his shoulder, run. Run now. It's a trap. As he said those 3 words, skeletons shot up from the ground with machine guns in their hands. The 4 conscious members of the quest turned and followed the clone out of the parking lot, running towards the Smithsonian. Naruto meanwhile built chakra in his legs before leaping up as the skeletons fired, shooting themselves but not destroying each other. The blonde's right arm came up in an attempt to defend himself from a sudden kick. Why is it you look 17, Naruto? Kakashi asked as he and Naruto traded blows while they descended to the ground. The man had to block Naruto's retaliating heel kick with his arm before he could continue questioning the blonde. Is that your mother's genes flowing through your veins? That's a secret, sensei, Naruto countered as they landed and continued to trade blows. Noticing that the man wasn't revealing his secret weapon, the blonde asked incredulously, we're sparring now. Meh, humor me, the gray-haired shinobi replied with a closed eye, it's been 7 years and I want to see how much stronger you've gotten. Naruto ducked under a kick and threw a left punch, which was caught in his ex-sensei's hand. The blonde rolled with the attempted shoulder throw that followed and landed on his feet. He spun around to return to the offensive, only to miss Kakashi as the man leapt away. Naruto pursued, pushing his foot down into the earth, cracking the blacktop as he jumped at the older shinobi. Kakashi ducked under his first flying punch, but was hit in the side with the following left hook. The gray-haired man released a gasp as he kicked his old student away. Kakashi cradled his side and wheezed as he felt for a fracture. Even though we're both holding back, the man mused before he went into several hand seals, katon, Kukaku no Jutsu, fire release, giant fireball technique. Placing a curled pointer and thumb in front of his mouth, Kakashi inhaled and exhaled, a large ball of fire was sent flying in the blonde's direction. Naruto crossed his arms in front of him as he jumped back. After the explosion and the smoke cleared, the Jonin was shocked to see his old student standing there with his golden brown jacket intact, while slightly smoking. So glad I grabbed this when I could, Naruto thought before flying through hand seals of his own, katon, Housenka no Jutsu, fire release, phoenix flower technique. As the blonde exhaled several bullets of fire, Kakashi's lone eye widened in thought, katon. The Jonin ducked and weaved under the multiple bursts of fire, getting slightly scorched from the close calls. He narrowed his eye as Naruto stood still with his eyes closed. Kakashi's lone eye widened in fear and surprise as he realized what was happening. Though his thoughts were just a tad off. Under his breath, Naruto whispered, God of the Wild, Master of the Land, grant me access to your power, so that I may join my friends again. His eyelids gained orange eyeliner, and his eyes became solid golden orbs with rectangular pupils. Naruto's fists clenched and he ran forward, creating small cracks in the ground with each step. Forced onto the defensive, Kakashi crossed his arms as a fist went flying faster than his original eye could track, impacting with the 2 limbs and breaking them. The Jonin cried out in pain as he was sent skidding, before he fell to his back. He groaned in pain, earning a look of sympathy from his old student. You're stronger than last time we sparred, Kakashi gasped out. As Naruto reached down to help him up, the Jonin shook his head, no, you have to go. Hurry, before my employer's strange summons hurt your friends." Naruto pulled his hand back before his eyes widened. "The skeletons." He turned to leave before calling back over his shoulder, "Sensei, before you go home, read up on what the natives call Greek mythology." Kakashi blinked in confusion, but before he could ask why, Naruto had bounded off with another chakra leap. Kakashi groaned as he fell to his back before chuckling. "Well, I could always find a new book," he said in English with a thick accent. Naruto landed hard on the ground before he felt Pan's blessing, as he called his new version of Sage Mode, wear off. Panting, he sniffed the air like his aunt had taught him before he turned left. "The subway? All right." He focused on the station that was close by before vanishing in a flash of light. Immediately after he reappeared, he was assaulted by the memory of the clone. The group was being hounded and Phoebe had been hit in the back of her leg by a stray bullet. Thalia was drowsily waking up before the clone was dispersed by a shot to the back, so he didn't know the current situation. "Hang on," he murmured to himself as he burst through a locked door. Following the sounds of clanging and war cries, he came across his group. Phoebe and Thalia had teamed up, with Thalia acting as her shield while Phoebe rested and covered from a distance. The skeletons seemed to have lost their guns and were using medieval weapons. Zoe was practically dancing with how she used her hunting blades. Though each of her strikes were futile, as the skeletons just regenerated whatever she cut off, be it a rib or a hand. Percy and Grover were copying Thalia and Phoebe, with Grover's miscellaneous junk being tossed at the undead while Percy hacked away at them. Naruto looked around for an escape and found it. A final train was boarding for the night, the underground locomotive was steaming at the wheels and preparing to leave. "Well now, there's an idea," Naruto mused, "but first, a distraction. Hope Grover and Thalia-chan remember this one. Hey boneheads!" Naruto called out to the skeletons as he channeled chakra throughout his body, "You all look a little pasty, you know what you need." Thalia frowned as she recalled the phrase, but couldn't place its meaning. Grover, who was more used to remembering under pressure, widened his eyes before he dropped and covered them. "Everyone cover your eyes and get down." The skeletons had their attention on the blonde that was making himself an easy target. Naruto grinned and shut his own eyes as he started to glow. Internally, he prayed that this would work like it did before, but without the god-awful pain that followed it last time. The other members of his quest had followed Grover's example, shielding their eyes, but Percy had an eye open to a squint, curiosity getting the best of him. His eye was forced shut when Naruto's light outdid that of the faulty lights of the subway. "Y'all need a tan. Solar flare!" Naruto cried as he released his built-up chakra and became a living explosion of heat and light. The skeletons shrieked in pain as the pure chakra coursed over their bodies, reducing them to ash. Naruto kept flooding the area with superheated light for a good minute before it died down and he fell to his hands and knees. Naruto bit his lip to keep from screaming in pure agony as his body felt like it was on fire. His arms wrapped around his sides and he groaned in pain. "Dad, you can go suck balls," he thought angrily as his body burned from the inside out. He felt someone grab the underside of his arm and pull him up. "Come on, Naruto," Grover's voice urged, "we have to go." "Where do we go?" Percy asked, "And what was that?" "The train." Naruto gasped out, "Quick! Jackson, give me a hand. Thalia-chan, help Zoe-chan with Phoebe. We have to go. It won't keep them down long." "They're ashes, what do you mean they won't be down long?" Percy asked in confusion. Naruto cracked an eye open and glared at the boy. "Are they golden dust?" The blonde hissed through his teeth. "No. Oh. Percy felt like he should smack himself in the head. "Glad you understand," Naruto grunted as he was carried towards the train. As the group boarded, the ashes of a skeleton slowly began to reform and a blackened bone hand clenched into a fist. It had been 3 trains later, a total of 5 hours between their train hopping, before the group of 6 had disembarked into a rundown train station somewhere near a freight yard. Naruto, now recovered thanks to his healing abilities, was walking with Percy and Thalia while Zoe helped Phoebe and Grover trailed after them like a lost puppy, the 3 latter hiding their shivers due to their cloaks and fur in Grover's case. "So that was something your dad blessed you with?" Percy summed up after Naruto explained his photokinesis. you can become a giant light bulb. Ha! Good one, Kelphead, Thalia snickered out. Naruto glared at her before he turned to Percy once again. Yes, and I can bend the light around me so that I become invisible to the naked eye, Naruto explained as he demonstrated before he returned to a visible state. The invisible man was based off my brother, H.G. Wells' antics. H.G. Wells. Percy repeated. Naruto groaned. The author of War of the Worlds. The Time Machine. The Island of Dr. Moreau? Seriously? You've never picked up a book in your life? The blonde asked, appalled. While he originally disliked reading due to his own dyslexia, he had picked it up shortly after he integrated himself in the real world. He once joked with Annabeth that maybe he was the secret love child between Apollo and Athena due to his newfound love for books. Dyslexic, Percy replied only to be slapped upside the head. Ow. What the hell? It's not an excuse, Jackson, Naruto chided with a frown as he lowered his hand. I'm dyslexic, too, and I managed to overcome it. Sure, I have the occasional struggle, but I can figure it out if you give me a bit of time. I guess I just don't like reading, Percy mumbled with a shrug. Naruto rolled his eyes. Better pick it up if you want Annabeth to like you, murmured the blonde jokingly as he walked ahead of the two. As he did so, both Percy and Thalia started to shiver. Why is it so cold all of a sudden? Percy asked through chattering teeth. Naruto looked back and laughed once he put it together. Sorry about that, he apologized while scratching the back of his head. He walked back to them and they felt the chill vanish. Thanks to Dad, I'm hot. Literally and figuratively. Like a walking furnace, Thalia murmured as she inched closer to the blonde. What about the others? I'm not a campfire, Naruto admitted before taking note of a sudden warmth to his right, but I'm sure he's willing to share. To the right of the group was a bundled-up homeless man, his features hidden by a hood and seated in front of a fire. A partially toothless smile was sent in the teen's direction. He reached out with a wrinkled hand and patted a stray newspaper as well as the ground. Come on and join me, kiddies, he said with a whistling voice, plenty o' room round the fire. Gee great. Grover exclaimed with a chatter as he sat down on the man's right, MIHH hooves ARS shaking. Feet. Percy hastily corrected as he took a seat next to his friend. Naruto sat next to him, followed by Thalia, then Phoebe, and finally Zoe took the spot closest to the homeless man's left. This is great, Phoebe complained with a shiver as she bundled up in her cloak, stuck ing gods only know W with two boys and a beast. Hey, I resent that remark. Naruto called out with a frown, Percy can't help his father's ingrained instincts. Hey. Percy replied with a slight blush. She was talking about thyself, Uzumaki, Zoe said with a smirk. Naruto pouted. Mina. She has a point though, Thalia chimed in with a frown, at this rate, we'll never get where we need to be. And where would that be, girlie? The homeless man asked curiously. Naruto replied almost instantly, making the others look at him oddly as he gave out the information, we need to go west and fast. Any ideas? West, huh? Sure, I know a way, you could always follow the sun. The homeless man chimed with a mad cackle afterwards. The group eyed the homeless man oddly and he sighed before pointing at a run-down advertisement. Sun West Line, huh? Naruto replied in disbelief as he stared at the homeless man, so, what's your name again? Oh, they call me Fred, the homeless man said with a smile. Naruto merely sighed and scratched the back of his neck before the group decided to take the Sun West Line. The blonde only wondered how much trouble Fred was going to be in. He noticed Percy look back to thank Fred, only for the campsite to be missing. Meanwhile, on Olympus the goddess of love was searching through notes she had jotted down. Eventually, she stopped and pulled at her hair. Ugh. Damn it. She swore before storming out of her temple, where is he? Eros. Eros, get out here. A child with a Nerf gun stopped shooting at some nymphs before running over to her. He wore a red shirt and black shorts, his feet covered by white running shoes. He stopped at her side and smiled, hello mother. Don't you, hello mother, me? Aphrodite scolded the boy, where is my Percabeth book? Percabeth, oh, you mean the seaweed boy and the owl girl scrapbook you are making? Eros asked after a moment, I don't know. Maybe Ares has it. He did say he was running out of demigod pictures to use for his dartboard. Aphrodite scowled and stormed towards the war god's temple, intent on getting her book back from her lover. As she stormed, she walked past a very empty temple of Apollo. That got Aphrodite to stop and walk back. She poked her head in and looked around. He never leaves his temple unguarded, humph, well if Artemis didn't slack off, he wouldn't be so forgetful, Aphrodite snorted as she entered the room. She walked around and eyed a few things before taking note of Apollo's seeing glass. It was focused on the eldest of this generation, Naruto. Tall, strong, and devilishly handsome, Aphrodite mused with a smirk, before frowning as she took note of his company, hunters. Black. How droll, but Zeus' dirty laundry is pining after him, I wonder, Nalia? No, Naruto. No, maybe Neria? Oh, I like that. Neria, maybe that's the pairing for him. Aphrodite. Hermes' voice made the goddess jump and spin around. The traveler's god eyed her with a frown, what are you doing in here? Nothing. Nothing, just helping Apollo with a little deal we have going on. The goddess of love lied, as she had been snooping before she left the temple, things to do and all that, so long, Hermes. Right. Hermes drawled in disbelief before he smirked, can't bullshit the bullshitter, Aphrodite. What are you thinking about in that love-obsessed head of yours? That's it for part 2. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.